allowance. In 1794, George asked Lady Jersey, his hitherto standby mistress, to see what she might be able to find him by way of a suitably Protestant princess. It is perhaps understandable that she did not wish to recommend anyone who would diminish her own standing with the prince. In view of the results, Lady Jersey's intervention proved catastrophic. George would have been better off asking the help of a less personally interested intermediary. What she came up with turned out to be one of Europe's least appealing princesses. Caroline of Brunswick was royal, in fact, George's first cousin. Her mother was the sister of his father. But that about covered her commendable qualities, aside from the prospective groom's belief the connection would please her uncle, his father. On the negative side, Caroline's speech was uncouth, her appearance astoundingly unregal, her bodily hygiene verging on the barbaric. George's cultured tastes clearly stood diametrically opposed to the princess's general lowness. The courtier Lord Malmesbury was nonetheless dispatched to Germany to inspect and negotiate. When in 1795 Caroline arrived in England and George first saw what his ill luck had brought him, he immediately called out to his valet for a brandy. Remaining insensibly drunk, even on his wedding night, the prince nonetheless performed conjugally, the result being a daughter whom he named Charlotte, after his own mother. The infant was destined to be, given the father's lack of regard for its mother, George's only heir. Caroline was, unsurprisingly, discarded almost immediately after Charlotte's conception, never again to spend a night with her husband, nor even to pass many more days under his roof. George would soon formally separate from a woman chiefly distinguished for being one of the most ill-used princesses in British history. 18 years later, Princess Charlotte, by then a young woman, was herself ready to mate. Understandably, she was leery of marriage, having seen her own childhood ruined by the aftermath of her parents' ill-sorted union. Though she was loyal to her father, Charlotte was nonetheless perfectly sensible to the Prince of Wales's many and varied shortcomings. She once confided that, "My mother was bad, but she would not have been so bad if my father had not been much worse still." But now grown, the all but certain heiress to the kingdom in which George was serving as regent for his mentally incapacitated father, had all Europe from which to choose a husband. Leopold of Coburg was the eventual winner of Charlotte's hand, and of future status as consort to a British monarch. Likely the handsomest prince in Europe, Leopold already boasted a distinguished career as a major general in the Russian army during the Napoleonic Wars, and, what gave him his eligibility to marry Charlotte, he was the younger son of the reigning duke of an insignificant, if picturesque, German duchy. Coburg claimed little more than 60,000 subjects, and was almost entirely unremarked upon in Europe's affairs, except for the extraordinary good looks borne by a high proportion of the sons of its reigning house. Even the great Napoleon himself once called Leopold the handsomest man I ever saw at the Tuileries. Of ponderous personality, and apt to measure every word with razor-edged precision, Leopold's sombre character stood in notable contrast to Charlotte's. The princess, though dignified and imperious, was outspoken and romantic, possessed of impulsive spirits and a generous heart. As for Leopold, he was cautiously quiet, not noticeably passionate, and had too little money to be generous. But in May 1816, the couple married, and the still gangly princess almost immediately became pregnant. She miscarried this first child, but quickly conceived again. On November 3, 1817, 3 weeks overdue in her second pregnancy, Charlotte's waters broke, and her doctors put her to bed. Had those doctors been less timid in their ministrations, the subsequent history of the world might have been greatly altered. But dealing with royal births tended to make even otherwise aggressive physicians think twice before applying necessary measures. Sir Richard Croft, Charlotte's obstetrician, examined the princess, without, of course, the slightest effort to employ sanitary methods, the medical implications of asepsis not then being understood. Judging that birth was near, the doctor called in the great officers of state to observe the event, a ritual long required at royal accouchements to ensure that no substitute baby was inserted into the royal line. But Croft and the witnesses were to be disappointed. The child refused to be